Welcome to Calm Stories for Sleep, where every night we help you gently drift into rest with peaceful tales from faraway places. Tonight, find a cozy place to lie down, close your eyes, and take a slow, deep breath. Let the world around you soften, and allow the quiet to settle in. You're safe here, among stars and stories. Before we begin, if you enjoy gentle adventures like this one, don't forget to subscribe and let your dreams carry you to new worlds, night after night. Now, let's begin our tale. Chapter 1: The Wanderer and the Fading Map. The wind had a particular softness that evening, brushing across the hills like a memory not yet forgotten. A pale, buttery moon rose over the landscape, casting long shadows and illuminating the silver edges of the grass. Down a quiet path, not marked on any ordinary map, walked a wanderer named Corin. Corin had been traveling for as long as he could remember, not because he had no home, but because he was always looking for something that felt like it. Glances of something rare, the quiet shimmer of dew just before dawn, the sound of an owl's wing slicing through mist, the hush of a village holding its breath. Its boots were worn smooth on the soles, and the leather strap of his satchel had been patched 3 times with thread of different colors, one from a forest dweller, one from a baker in the misty hills, and one from a child who traded it for a song. Had he wandered every path there was to wander? Just then, a sudden gust of wind swirled through the willow's hanging branches. It lifted the edges of the map, and one corner flipped over to reveal something Corin had never noticed. A tiny, inked lantern glowing faintly, a path leading to Liora. Some of the paths on the map seemed to move on their own, rearranging gently, like clouds drifting in a dream. But in recent months, the map had grown dim, its details fading like forgotten whispers. The script looked different, too, elegant and curling, like it had been written with a breeze. Corin's heart quickened. He rose, adjusting his cloak, and followed the direction where the moon hung low, toward the newly drawn trail. He didn't collect gold or jewels. Corin collected stories, places, fireflies flitted in clusters, but they didn't move randomly. Around its base, wildflowers had grown in a perfect circle. They hovered in patterns, dancing in lines that mimicked the glowing dots on the map. Corin turned. Another lantern had appeared further ahead, and then another. It was like a trail laid out just for him, encouraging, guiding. One glowed blue like a calm sea, another green like forest light through spring leaves. One lantern smelled faintly of cinnamon and rain. Another hummed gently when he passed beneath it. He followed. The tree rustled without wind, making a sound like pages turning. Corin sat, as though the heaviness of all the places he'd ever been was lifting. That evening, as the stars began to peek through the twilight veil, Corin sat beside an old willow near the edge of an unnamed meadow. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a map. Not just any map, but a special one. The map had been with him since the beginning. It was odd, hand-drawn in faded inks that shifted ever so slightly when moonlight hit them. Corin sighed. Was his journey nearing its end? He laid the map on the ground and stared up at the stars, thinking, time in places like this doesn't quite behave the same way. It stretches like taffy and curls like steam. He blinked. That name hadn't been there before. He was sure of it. As he looked into its light, an image shimmered faintly within the glass. A field of stars over water, a tiny boat drifting without an oar. Then it blinked, and the light pulsed once. As he watched, The lantern on the map pulsed softly, and tiny dots began to glow one by one, forming a winding path through unknown hills and forests. It was as though the map itself had remembered something and wanted to show him. He folded the map carefully, cradling it like a fragile secret. The path began at the edge of the meadow, where the grass grew longer and shimmered faintly under the moonlight. It was quiet, peaceful, and yet something in the stillness tugged at Corin's imagination. Deeper he wandered, guided by the hush of night and the quiet rhythm of his own steps. An hour passed, maybe more. Then, just beyond a thicket of soft-branched trees, Corin saw it, the first lantern. It hung from a crooked wooden post, gently swaying, though there was no wind. It glowed a warm golden hue, not bright, but inviting. Corin stepped closer and touched it. The lantern was cool, but not cold. A soft chime rang through the air, distant, almost like laughter or song. Each glowing orb seemed to reveal itself only when the one before it had been reached. Each lantern had its own personality. With each step, Corin felt lighter, not in body, but in mind, not forgotten, just resting. Eventually, the lanterns led him to a quiet glade, where an old wooden bench sat beneath a tree with silver leaves. The lantern above him dimmed just slightly, casting a soft golden glow over the bench. He closed his eyes, and in that moment the silence deepened. He heard not the night birds or the wind, but something older, quieter, like the breath of the earth itself. And then a voice, not spoken aloud, but felt in his chest, like the echo of a lullaby sung long ago. "You are near," it said. "The story has been waiting." Corin opened his eyes slowly. The lanterns ahead flickered in anticipation, like a trail of stars holding their breath. The path to Liora was real, and it was waiting. The village beneath the dreaming tree. The path led the wanderer deeper into the forest, where the trees whispered in voices only the wind could translate. Lanterns, softly pulsing with hues of lavender and gold, floated ahead like patient guides. The further the traveler followed, the more the ordinary world seemed to blur, and something new, something older than time, began to bloom around them. After what felt like both an hour and a century, the forest opened into a clearing bathed in moonlight. At its heart stood a great tree, enormous and ancient, with silver bark that shimmered like stars, and roots that twisted into the earth like slumbering serpents. Tiny glowing pods, shaped like glass-blown teardrops, hung from its branches, and each one pulsed with a gentle light, as if it held a sliver of a forgotten dream. Nestled around the tree was a village, not of stone or wood, but of woven willow and moss, with rooftops covered in wildflowers and soft, bioluminescent blooms. Windows glowed softly in the night. A breeze carried the scent of lavender, chamomile, and something sweetly unplaceable. The wanderer stood in awe. "Welcome," said a voice like wind chimes. A figure stepped forward from behind the dreaming tree. She wore robes that looked like they were stitched from moonbeams and twilight, and her eyes shimmered with reflections of stars. "I'm Mira," she said with a bow. "Dreamkeeper of Liora." "Liora," the wanderer echoed. Mira nodded. "The place where forgotten dreams rest." "You've been called here." The wanderer's map, which had guided them so far, fluttered softly in their pocket, as if to confirm it. Mira gestured for them to follow, leading them into the heart of the village. Along the winding paths, villagers with serene expressions moved quietly. Some tended to soft, glowing gardens. Others hummed lullabies to the lanterns that floated above their homes. They're caretakers of dreams, Myra explained. Each lantern holds a dream left behind, a forgotten wish, a lost story, a memory unremembered. Why are they here? The wanderer asked. Because people stop believing, she said gently. They grow up. They bury magic beneath tasks and timelines. But the dreams, they don't vanish. They find their way here. A child ran past them, giggling, chased by a cat that shimmered like moonlight. The wanderer smiled. Mira led them to a small cottage, where a wooden chair and a steaming cup of tea waited. The tea smelled like comfort-warm cinnamon and a touch of something nostalgic. You'll rest here tonight, Mira said. Tomorrow, your path will unfold. The wanderer sat and cradled the tea. As they looked around, they noticed a lantern floating near the door. Inside it, flickering softly, was a vision of a younger self, laughing, spinning in circles beneath falling autumn leaves. A memory long forgotten. Is that ... mine? The wanderer whispered. Mira nodded. It's one of many. Night deepened. Stars painted the sky above Liora, and the dreaming tree shimmered with soft light. Somewhere in the village, a lullaby began, gentle, wordless, sung by voices full of kindness and wonder. The wanderer closed their eyes, and for the first time in years, slipped into sleep without effort, without fear. And in their dreams, a path lit with lanterns unfurled once again. The lantern that sang the morning in Liora wasn't quite morning. It felt like a slow stretch into soft gray light. The sun didn't shine brightly here, not harsh or golden, but misted in hues of blush and pearl. Dew clung to the leaves like tiny stars. The child's laughter, the wind in the tall grass, the way the sky blushed when they reached for a star, and the lantern, that glowing orb that shimmered like it knew them. A soft chime drifted through the window. The wanderer rose and stepped outside. One of the lanterns on the dreaming tree had changed. It glowed brighter than the others, and it sang, not loudly, just a gentle hum, a melody more felt than heard. It stirred something in the chest, like remembering the tune of a lullaby your mother used to hum before sleep. Myra stood beneath the tree already. It called to you, she said simply. Some dreams are waiting for the right heart to remember them. The wanderer stared at the glowing lantern, but that dream wasn't mine. Mira smiled. Dreams are shared things, like stories. Sometimes they come to you not because they are yours, but because they trust you to carry them. They watched the lantern together, listening to its soft music. Later that morning, Mira led the wanderer into the village square. A few villagers had emerged, quiet, thoughtful folk with eyes that looked both old and childlike. They greeted the wanderer with polite nods and soft smiles, as if recognizing something they had forgotten. At the center of the square was a circular pool filled with clear water. Reflections danced on its surface, but strangely, they didn't mirror reality. Instead, the pool showed flickers of stories. A bird made of light soaring across desert dunes. A woman weaving threads from moonlight. A boy painting stars in the sky with a feathered brush. This is the pool of echoes, Mira explained. It remembers what we forget, but it only shows itself to those who still believe in wonder. The wanderer leaned in closer. The reflection changed, now showing the child from their dream, reaching for the star again. But this time, the child turned and looked directly at them, smiling. A voice, quiet and airy, filled the wanderer's mind. Tell my story. The surface of the water rippled, and the image vanished. The wanderer sat back slowly, heart racing. Mira nodded. That lantern is a keeper's lantern, she said. You've been chosen to bear its dream, to carry it beyond Liora, and maybe relight the world. But how? Myra didn't answer. Instead, she handed the wanderer a small satchel. Inside was a jar, and inside that jar, the tiniest flicker of light, a seed, she said, of dreams, of story. Carry it with you, and when the moment is right, you'll know what to do. That night, the wanderer sat beneath the dreaming tree again. The lantern still sang, and for the first time in a long time, they sang back, the forest of forgotten whispers. The next morning, a hush had fallen over Liora, deeper than quiet, like the village was holding its breath. The lanterns on the dreaming tree swayed slightly, though no breeze stirred. From the edge of the village, the woods beckoned. Myra handed the wanderer a staff, not for walking, but carved with symbols that pulsed faintly under their fingers. You'll need this, she said. The forest doesn't forget, but it also doesn't forgive. The wanderer raised an eyebrow. Forgive what? Abandonment, Myra whispered. It remembers every forgotten dream. With the keeper's lantern gently glowing at their side, and the dream seed tucked securely in the satchel, the wanderer followed a narrow path out of Liora. It curved downward into shadow, where the trees grew tall and twisted, gnarled roots weaving into the path like old bones. This was the forest of forgotten whispers. The light dimmed, filtered through thick canopies of violet and emerald leaves. The air shimmered strangely, as though every breath carried the weight of old stories. The wanderer could hear it, faint voices, whispers that fluttered just past understanding. Each tree seemed to hold a face, not fully formed, but etched into bark, closed eyes, pursed lips, listening. A memory rose unbidden in the wanderer's mind, a childhood moment, running barefoot through grass, chasing fireflies beneath a summer sky. Their heart clenched. That memory had been long buried, but here the forest remembered. The first test came swiftly. A clearing opened ahead, bathed in pale lavender mist. In the center stood a boy, or something shaped like one, with hollow eyes and strings of forgotten dreams tangled in his hair. Threads of color and sound and story knotted around him. He looked up as the wanderer approached. I can't find my dream, the boy said. I lost it. Will you give me yours? The lantern at the wanderer's side pulsed. The boy reached toward it. The wanderer stepped back. I'm here to remember, not forget. The boy's shape flickered, shifting into a swirl of ink and shadow, then dissipated. The forest sighed. You passed, came a rustling voice from the branches. A bird, feathered in silver and dusk, landed on a nearby root. Many come offering pieces of themselves, hoping the forest will give them something in return. But only those who carry stories with care may walk deeper. It introduced itself as Thren, a guide of sorts. I remember everything that's ever been whispered to the trees, the bird said, and some things that haven't yet. Thren flew ahead, and the wanderer followed. The path shifted constantly, trees leaning aside or closing behind them. Here, time didn't flow, it spiraled. They passed a glade where dreams drifted like soap bubbles, each one reflecting a different memory. A girl playing a violin to a sleeping bear, a pirate ship made of clouds, an old woman dancing with shadows. These are unclaimed dreams, Thren said. Beautiful, dangerous, they long to be remembered. The wanderer paused, drawn toward one bubble that shimmered gold. Inside, a younger version of themselves sat beside a fire, telling a story to someone they couldn't quite see. Laughter, gentle and loving, echoed from within. A flicker of pain bloomed, a story left untold, a promise never fulfilled. They never listened, the wanderer whispered. But you still told it, Thren said. That matters. The bubble drifted toward the lantern and merged with its glow, deepening its hue. The forest pulsed with approval. By twilight, though whether it was true evening or just the forest's illusion was impossible to say, they reached the oldest tree. It was massive, bark blackened and silver-lined, roots spiraling deep into the ground like the veins of the earth. At its base sat a door carved from memory itself, etched with names no longer spoken aloud. Thren landed on the wanderer's shoulder. This is the archive tree. All dreams forgotten by their dreamers are kept here. The door opened with a sigh. Inside, silence reigned. Shelves upon shelves of glowing orbs lined the walls, not unlike the jars in Mira's cottage, but older, dimmer, quieter. Each orb contained a dream abandoned before its time, hopes buried by fear, wishes dismissed as foolish ideas snuffed out by doubt. The wanderer walked slowly, letting the light of their lantern illuminate the shelves. Some dreams flickered to life as they passed, startled, like fireflies caught in a breeze. They paused before one orb, its glow nearly extinguished. Inside was a tiny boat on a paper sea, sailing toward a sun that blinked like a dying star. It pulled at them. Without knowing why, the wanderer lifted the orb and breathed onto it. Their breath was soft, but filled with intent. The dream pulsed once, twice, and then glowed steadily. Behind them, the shelves shimmered. Other orbs began to brighten. The room, the forest, responded. You are waking them, Thren said. This is what a keeper does, not just to carry dreams, but to awaken them. A low groan rumbled beneath their feet. The archive tree shivered. Its bark split gently, revealing a hollow filled with symbols, stars, rivers, birds, stories. At the center lay a single, dormant lantern. Unlike any the wanderer had seen, it was shaped like a teardrop and wrapped in silver vines. No light came from within, but the moment the wanderer approached, the keeper's lantern began to hum. The dream seed in their satchel quivered. They reached out, hand trembling, and touched the dormant lantern. A rush of wind, voices, memories, 1,000 dreams surged through them. Dreams of the lost, the quiet, the forgotten, each one flickering like stars in a storm. And then, silence. The lantern in their hand glowed softly. It had awakened. You've earned the dream right's light, Thren said reverently. It can only be lit by one who listens with more than ears, who remembers with more than mind. The forest began to recede. The trees shifted, opening a new path. The whispers faded into song, not mournful, grateful. As they walked, Thren rested on the wanderer's shoulder once more. You carry them now, the bird said, their stories, their chances, their light. The forest's edge appeared, and beyond it, Liora shimmered like a dream remembered. The wanderer stepped into the moonlight, the dreamwright's lantern glowing beside the keeper's lantern. One for what was remembered, one for what must never be forgotten again. Mira stood waiting, and she smiled. The starweavers loom. Back in Liora, the stars had begun to shimmer with unusual brightness. Mira met the wanderer at the edge of the village and led them toward a hidden path that spiraled up behind the dreaming tree, where few had ever dared to tread. You awakened the dreamwright's light, she said, her voice nearly reverent. Now, The starweaver must spin it into the threads of the sky. They climbed the winding trail as twilight deepened, the lanterns in the village flickering below like tiny echoes of stars. The air grew thinner, cooler, kissed with the scent of jasmine and memory. The higher they went, the quieter the world became, until even thoughts felt like they might echo. At the summit, a platform carved into a crescent moon awaited them, and there, in the center, was a loom unlike any ever crafted. Made of starlight and silver branches, it hummed with unseen motion. Floating around it were skeins of glowing threads, gold, lavender, midnight blue, and soft rose twisting like strands of fate. A figure stood before the loom. She was tall and wrapped in robes that shimmered with constellations. Her eyes held entire galaxies, and her hands moved as if in time with the universe. "Welcome," said the starweaver. Her voice rang like bells in deep water. "You've brought me something long lost." The wanderer stepped forward, presenting the newly awakened lantern. It pulsed gently, glowing with the breath of dreams it carried. "You must help me weave it," the starweaver said, "for no single soul can place a new thread into the tapestry alone." She guided them to sit opposite her. The loom began to glow brighter. The air shimmered. She touched a spindle, and strands of dreamlight unraveled from the lantern. The colors danced between her fingers. "This is not just light," she said. "It is legacy, emotion, the wishes of those who never dared to speak their hopes aloud." The wanderer watched as the starweaver began to pass threads through the loom, and as she did, visions filled the air. A child in a city without stars, drawing constellations on the walls of their room. A sailor staring into fog, whispering to the waves for a safe return. A poet burning their work in fear, only to watch the ash form verses in the wind. Each dream, each forgotten moment, found a place in the pattern. "Now you," the starweaver said. The wanderer hesitated, then raised their hands to the loom. The threads responded, swirling into familiar colors: warm orange, soft lilac, a dusk-touched blue. These were the wanderer's dreams, long buried, but never extinguished. With careful motion, they passed the thread through the loom. Alongside the starweavers, a new scene formed. A young voice, once silenced, now standing in a clearing of lanterns, telling a story to fireflies who listened with full hearts. "This is what it means to be remembered," the starweaver said gently. "To give your light and see it dance among others." As they worked, the stars above responded. One by one, new points of light flared in the sky, arranged in new constellations that whispered old truths. Every story matters. Even forgotten dreams leave echoes. The weaving continued for hours, or perhaps no time at all. In the starweaver's chamber, clocks didn't tick only, stories moved forward. When they finally finished, the starweaver tied off the final thread and touched the loom gently. The entire sky above shimmered with their combined work. "You have changed the heavens tonight," she said. "Now, those who look up will remember what it feels like to hope." She handed the lantern back, now glowing with both their energies, no longer simply a keeper's tool, but a woven beacon of light. "The path forward will not be simple," she warned softly. "The dream thieves will not welcome your light." The wanderer bowed, "Then let them fear it." With that, the starweaver vanished into starlight, and the loom dimmed. Myra was waiting at the base of the hill, a faint smile on her lips as she gazed at the now sparkling sky. "They'll see them tonight," she said. "The villagers, the stars you wove." The wanderer looked up. A new constellation blinked into being, shaped like a lantern held aloft, and in that quiet, starlit moment, they knew the story was only just beginning. The memory market. Morning in Liora bloomed slowly. Sunlight filtered through the dreaming trees' branches, casting dancing patterns across the cobblestones. Dew glistened like captured starlight, and the air was thick with the scent of honeyed moss and roasted cinnamon bark. The wanderer awoke in the attic room above Mira's cottage, still holding the lantern, now brighter than before its glow, no longer just gentle, but pulsing faintly with woven magic. Downstairs, Myra was already up, boiling tea made from petals that only bloomed in dreams. She turned with a twinkle in her eye. "You'll want your cloak," she said. "Today is market day." The wanderer blinked. "A regular market?" Mira's grin widened. No, this is the market, the one held in the hidden square. It only appears once every 7 moonfuls. Today, the memory market returns." They packed lightly. Myra handed the wanderer a pouch made of soft, green velvet. "What's this for?" they asked. "For trade," she replied. "Memories are currency at the market. But not just any memories. You have to be willing to part with them." Outside, Liora buzzed with quiet excitement. Children whispered about invisible booths, and elders polished their best walking sticks, some carved with stories of their youth. The path to the market wasn't marked. Instead, the villagers followed the scent of starfruit and the sound of harps made from rain. Mira led the wanderer through winding alleys and over moss-covered bridges until they reached a courtyard that hadn't been there before. It shimmered at the edges. Lanterns floated in mid-air, and stalls of all shapes and sizes stretched outward in an impossible spiral. Some were made from stacked books, others from woven fog, still others from great snail shells painted with runes. At the entrance stood a gatekeeper with translucent skin that reflected the wanderer's expression. He bowed and extended a hand. "Name your deepest feeling from this week," he said gently. "It is your key." The wanderer hesitated, then, in a quiet voice, replied, "Hope." The gatekeeper nodded solemnly and stepped aside. "Then enter in peace, bearer of light." The memory market pulsed with quiet wonder. A booth offered jars of laughterial, bottled laughter that chimed like bells when shaken. Another sold folded pieces of lost advice. Each page fluttered in the breeze, whispering things like "you're stronger than you think," and "rest is a kind of courage." Myra paused at a stand run by an owl with spectacles. "I'm trading a childhood snow day," she told him, "for one perfect lullaby." The owl peered at her through thick lenses. "Excellent value," he hooted, handing her a ribbon tied with melody. The wanderer wandered deeper. One booth shimmered with hanging threads, each a memory for sale. The vendor, a girl made of clouds, smiled and said, "Browse freely, but only take what you'll carry with care." The wanderer touched a thread and suddenly saw a woman dancing barefoot in a field of golden reeds, twirling until she dissolved into laughter. They stepped back, awestruck. Mira found them again, with a warm pastry in hand. "You okay?" "I saw someone's memory," the wanderer murmured. She nodded. "That's the rule of the market. Nothing here is fake. Everything matters, even what you almost remember." They approached a long, low booth built from driftwood. Behind it sat a man with skin like riverstone and eyes full of stars. He regarded the wanderer's lantern. "Ah," he said, "keeper light, woven recently, beautiful work." He reached beneath the table and produced a mirror with no reflection. "Would you trade?" he asked. The wanderer tilted their head. What's it for? To show you who you were before you forgot. Myra looked cautious. That's dangerous. Not all old selves are kind, but the wanderer took the mirror anyway. It shimmered as they held it hand, though it showed no face. It whispered. It whispered of small joys, long buried, a notebook beneath a tree. A fire danced to a forgotten tune, a child's voice reading to imaginary friends. The wanderer's heart squeezed. They set it gently down. Not today. The man smiled kindly. Wise choice. Sometimes the best memories are the ones we grow into. As they turned to leave, a sudden ripple passed through the market. Every stall fell silent. The air grew heavier. The lanterns above dimmed. A woman in a gray cloak moved through the spiral. Her steps made no sound. Her eyes were dark, not unkind, but distant, as though she lived behind a veil. She paused at the driftwood booth. I've come for the echo. The stone-skinned man bowed. You know the cost. I do. She placed a single tear on the table. It turned to crystal. The man nodded, reached below, and brought out a single folded memory tied in black thread. The woman accepted it, opened it slowly, and closed her eyes. Wind shifted through the market, and then she was gone. Mira exhaled. That was a dream collector. The wanderer looked confused. They come here for memories no one else dares carry. Painful ones. Not to erase them, but to keep them safe. They walked on in silence, letting the market flow around them once more. At the heart of the spiral stood a fountain, but instead of water, it flowed with soft, light liquid memory, pooling in a basin of stone carved with names. Above it hung a bell. The warden of dreams stood beside it. You found your way here, they said. That's good. Why is the market here? The wanderer asked. Now, the warden smiled sadly, because soon the thieves of slumber will return. And when they do, only those who've held tight to memory will be strong enough to resist them. They looked toward the fountain. This is the well of remembering. Every villager adds a memory, something they cherish. When darkness comes, it's this we'll draw from. They handed the wanderer a small slip of silver parchment. You must offer one too. The wanderer thought for a long time. Then they wrote, the first time I was listened to and truly believed. They folded it gently and placed it in the glowing basin. The liquid shimmered, accepted the gift, and swirled with renewed light. The warden bowed. Thank you. Then turned to Mira. And you. She stepped forward and dropped in a tiny charma silver bell. My grandmother's laugh, she said. The fountain glowed brighter. As they left the market, its stalls began to fold in on themselves, fading into mist and thread. The memory market had come and gone like a dream, but its warmth lingered. Myra and the wanderer walked home under a sky dusted with new stars. That was more than I expected, the wanderer said softly. Myra nodded. The heart remembers what the mind forgets. Now, so do you. The lantern pulsed at their side, stronger, steadier, fuller. The dreaming tree, tall in the distance, rustled gently in the night breeze, as if it had felt the offering. As they stepped into Mira's cottage, the scent of candlewood and home surrounded them. Sleep came quickly that night, deep and peaceful. But far beyond Liora, in forgotten corners of the world, something stirred. The thieves of slumber were waking, and they had not forgotten. The thieves of slumber. The village of Liora had begun to stir with stories. Children woke, speaking of constellations they had never learned. Elders remembered dreams long faded, and lanterns that had once glowed dimly now shone brighter. than ever before. The Dreamwright's light was changing, things healing, reminding, awakening. But light, as it often does, draws shadows. Word of Leora's awakening spread beyond the valleys, beyond the quiet rivers, and into the dry and distant lands, where dreams were bartered and stolen. The thieves of slumber, long forgotten by most, heard whispers of the Dreamwright's return, and they were not pleased. They lived in a land where no lanterns shone, and nightfall came with an ache, a twisted network of caverns hidden beneath a mountain range. No map dared chart was their home. In these tunnels, the thieves collected fragments of slumber, stolen sighs, forgotten lullabies, the half-formed wishes of restless sleepers. They weaved these fragments into dreamless cloaks and bottled serenity to sell to those who had lost their rest. But real dreams, genuine, vivid dreams, were harder to find and more dangerous. In the deepest cavern, their leader stirred. She was called Noctis, cloaked in shifting shadow, her eyes like voids pulling light inward. Around her neck hung a chain of broken dream threads, each a tale she had stolen and unspooled. "The light has returned," whispered one of the younger thieves, bowing low. "The Dreamwright's lantern sings again. The villagers are remembering. Then we will remind them what it costs to hope," Noctis replied. Back in Liora, the wanderer stood atop the dreaming tree, gazing out at the horizon. Mira approached with her usual calm smile, though her eyes were troubled. "They're coming, aren't they?" the wanderer asked. She nodded. "The ones who feed on sleep. They cannot bear what we've rekindled." The lantern in the wanderer's hand pulsed with warmth. "Then we'll meet them with light," they said. That evening, Myra led the wanderer to a quiet grove at the edge of the village. There villagers sat in circles, each holding their own glowing lanterns. Stories flowed freely, now spoken aloud and drifting into the trees like fireflies. "This is our shield," Mira explained. "They feed on silence, on dreams we hide away. But if we share them freely and openly, the thieves lose their power." But not all lanterns were lit. Some villagers still held their memories tightly. That night, the wind changed. A cold hush swept over the village as clouds covered the stars. From the woods, whispers echoed. The thieves had arrived. Shapes moved like smoke among the trees, not fully formed, more felt than seen. As they entered the village, lanterns dimmed. Sleep grew uneasy. Children stirred in their beds, crying out. The wanderer stood in the center of Liora, holding the Dreamwright's lantern high. Its glow held steady, but the darkness pressed close. From the shadows stepped Noctis. She didn't speak at first, only observed. Then she said, "This light doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everyone," the wanderer replied. "Dreams are fragile things," she hissed. "They break so easily. That's why we keep them safe, stored, controlled, or stolen." Myra stepped forward. Noctis' gaze snapped to her. "Some things are too dangerous to be remembered. Hope, most of all." The villagers began to gather behind Mira and the wanderer, their lanterns slowly brightening. Even those who had hidden their dreams now brought them forward. One by one, voices rose. "I dreamed of flying over rivers of stars. I dreamed of my mother's song. I dreamed of becoming something more." Each confession, each story, added fuel to the light. Noctis faltered. Her cloak flickered. "You cannot stop us," she snarled. "You cannot protect them all." "Maybe not," the wanderer said, stepping forward. "But we can remind them how to protect themselves." They raised the lantern. Its light flared, casting shapes into the sky, not just stars, but memories. 1,000 shared dreams woven together. The thieves recoiled, shadows peeled back. Noctis let out a cry and vanished into the dark, her cloak unraveling into mist. Silence returned, but it was not the cold silence of fear. It was a warm hush, like a lullaby's final note. Mira turned to the wanderer, her expression full of awe. "You didn't just light a lantern," she whispered. "You lit the way forward." From the trees, more villagers emerged. Lanterns were passed, tears flowed, songs were sung. The darkness had tested them, and they had answered with light. The Dreamwright's lantern pulsed once more. Then it whispered, "It is time." The wanderer looked toward the northern mountains. "There's more to do," they said. Mira nodded. "Then we'll walk with you as far as we can." As dawn touched the horizon, the village of Liora stood brighter than ever before. And though the thieves might return, they would find no silence left to steal. Only songs. The archivist of echoes. After the chaos beneath the hill, the village of Liora stood quieter than ever. The lanterns still flickered from tree branches, but they held a different kind of glow, now a cautious, watchful light. Myra and the wanderer sat beneath the dreaming tree, their thoughts heavy with the battle just endured. "You said the stories were being stolen," Mira murmured. The wanderer looked up toward the horizon, where dawn had only just begun to stretch its fingers. "There's someone," they said, "who doesn't let any voice vanish. Even echoes have guardians." They spoke of the archivist, a being older than the hills, who lived in a place where forgotten songs lingered in the air and names long erased still whispered from stone walls. Without another word, they both stood, ready to find her. Their journey took them through veils of mist and low hills blanketed in soft, glowing moss. The air itself grew quieter with every step until even their breathing seemed too loud. As they moved, voices drifted in and out, snippets of stories, fragments of lullabies, names called out and never answered. Eventually, they arrived at the archive. The air shimmered with an energy both somber and sacred. At the heart of the grove stood a tree unlike any other, silver-barked, leafless, yet pulsing with light. Its trunk was carved with thousands of tiny symbols, ancient alphabets, forgotten languages, and dream script. Leaning against the base of this strange tree was the archivist. She wore robes of charcoal and pearl, embroidered with shifting patterns that mirrored sound waves. Her hair was woven into long braids, laced with memory bedsteiny spheres that glowed with the stories trapped within. She opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream deeper than sleep. "You've brought a lantern touched by the starweaver," she said, "and hearts still echoing with stories." Mira stepped forward. "We need to know what's been lost and how to protect it." The archivist studied them with eyes like polished onyx. "Then come," she said, "and listen." She led them deeper into the grove. As they passed each monolith, the stones pulsed softly and released murmurs into the air. A child's laughter, a prayer said in secret, a lullaby hummed through tears. "Each of these holds a voice nearly forgotten," the archivist explained, "and I keep them safe until someone is ready to carry them forward." They reached a clearing where a circle of memory beads floated mid-air, spinning slowly. "These are echoes," she said. "Most people don't hear them, but those who carry dreamlight, you can help restore them." She turned to the wanderer and held out a bead that glowed faintly blue. He believed someone, someday, would find them, but no one did. His stories are nearly gone. The wanderer closed their hand around the bead. A warmth spread up their arm, followed by a rush of emotion, hope, loneliness, creativity. Without knowing how, they began to whisper, not in their own voice, but in the boy's, a tale unfurled of bottled stories drifting through reeds, of a boy watching the moon and naming it friend of dreams, too tender for the world. When the wanderer finished, the bead flashed once, then stilled. Its glow brightened. "He's remembered now," the archivist said. She handed one to Mira, a pale pink bead that thrummed with music. Mira closed her eyes and began to hum, soft and low. A tune born from a grandmother's rocking chair, sweet with sugar and sunshine, filled the grove. When she opened her eyes, the bead spun joyfully. "The thieves of slumber," said the archivist, "cannot erase what has been restored. But they are searching for the deepest silences. That is where they slip in." She turned to the silver tree. "This," she said, "is the echo tree, planted at the beginning of dreaming. Every whisper carved into its bark keeps the world from falling silent." The tree shimmered, and the wanderer reached out, touching a symbol that resonated. Instantly, they saw a vision, a traveler sitting beside a stranger's campfire, sharing a ghost story passed from grandmother to grandchild across generations. That story carried more than fear, it carried connection, history, and memory. "These moments are sacred," the archivist said. She reached beneath her robes and withdrew a long scroll made of translucent fibers. "It's time," she said, "to write your own echo." The wanderer blinked. Yes. If your story is to live beyond this fight, it must be named, spoken, etched into the roots of the dream." She handed them the scroll and a quill made from phoenix feather. Together, Mira and the wanderer knelt before the echo tree. On the scroll, they began to write not just what had happened, but who they had become. The chapter of the wanderer who refused to forget, the girl who protected forgotten stories, the village that remembered how to dream. As they wrote, the tree absorbed their words, and a new carving formed among the countless others. The archivist nodded, satisfied. "Now your light will echo too." Before they left, she gave them each a final gift, a single memory bead, empty, waiting to be filled. "Find those who have almost been forgotten," she whispered. "Let their stories breathe again." And as Mira and the wanderer stepped out of the grove, the monoliths sang behind them a chorus of memory, rising gently into the air. The Hollow Festival. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of lavender and molten amber, the entire village of Liora had transformed. Lanterns bloomed like flowers from every rooftop and branch. Silken banners shimmered between homes, catching the last golden light of day. At the village square, a great spiral had been drawn into the ground using glimmering blue Sultan ancient pattern, meant to invite memory and ward off forgetfulness. It was the eve of the Hollow Festival. The wanderer, their lantern, now woven with the starweavers' light, stood at the edge of the square beside Mira and the twins, Adi and Loon. All around them, the villagers gathered, faces lit by gentle anticipation, each holding a small, unlit lantern of their own. Mira turned to the wanderer. "It begins now, as it always does, with the telling of one forgotten truth." She stepped forward, raising her own lantern. Long ago, the people of Liora stopped dreaming, not because they wanted to, but because something old, something hollow, began feeding on their sleep. So the dream rites created this night, every year, to remind us of who we were, and who we still might be. As her words faded, soft music began, a haunting melody of flutes, strings, and the slow rhythm of drums. Dancers stepped into the spiral with veils that sparkled like mist. They moved like memories, sometimes graceful, sometimes broken, telling silent stories with every turn. The wanderer's heart stirred. This was no mere celebration, it was a ritual, a collective remembering. Mira approached them with a soft smile. Tonight, you'll walk the spiral of hollow echoes, but not just as a guest. A hush fell over the crowd as the wanderer stepped into the first curve of the spiral. Each step forward stirred something deeper. The salt beneath their feet shimmered, and as they moved inward, the village faded from sight. The music grew distant. The spiral closed around them like a dream, pulling inward. Suddenly, the air shifted. They weren't in the square anymore. They stood in a mirror of Liora, dim and silvered, as if caught in moonlight and shadow. The winds stood quiet and strange. Trees whispered, but no wind stirred. This was the hollow reflection Mira had once set a place between now and memory, where truths slept and fears whispered in plain sight. The wanderer's lantern pulsed faintly. They held it forward and stepped deeper. All at once, the fog around them stirred and began to speak, not in words, but in echoes, snippets of laughter, broken lullabies, cries of joy and sorrow, echoes of the village's lost dreams. And with each sound came a face, a flicker of someone who once dreamed and no longer remembered how. They saw a child reaching for a kite they never built, an old man weeping beside a cold fireplace, a woman pressing her palm to a window, waiting for someone who never returned. The wanderer's chest ached. They wanted to help, to hold them, but the hollow would not let them touch. A shadow stirred behind them. They turned and saw it. The hollow, not a creature, not truly. It had no shape, only shifting tendrils of absence, like fog that devoured sound and feeling. It hissed with stillness and moved with the speed of forgetting. It had no face, but its presence was unbearable, as if it remembered you before you could remember yourself. It crept toward the echoes, and as it did, each flickering figure, the dreaming child, the old man, the woman, began to dim. No, the wanderer whispered. The lantern in their hand flared. Light met darkness. The hollow recoiled. The wanderer raised the lantern high. It pulsed with the dreamlight of the starweaver, with memories gathered from the village, from their journey, and from their own hidden past. You cannot have them, they said. They are not yours to erase. The hollow paused, swirling, as if curious, and then it spoke, but not in any voice. It spoke in the wanderer's own voice, twisting their fears, feeding on doubt. You don't belong here, it hissed. You're not one of them, just a dreamer lost in another dream. I came to remember, the wanderer replied, and to help others do the same. The hollow lunged, but the lantern's light burst outward in a radiant wave. Memory answered. One by one, the echoes returned. The child lifted the kite into the sky. The old man lit the fireplace and smiled at the warmth. The woman at the window opened the door, letting in a breeze filled with starlight. The hollow shrieked, not in pain, but in defeat. It didn't vanish, not completely. It retreated, seeping into the cracks of the hollow reflection, waiting for the next dreamer who dared to forget. But tonight it had lost. The wanderer stood in the spiral's center, lantern glowing, and all around them the hollow world began to dissolve. And then they were back. The square erupted in cheers and music. Villagers wept openly, lanterns now glowing with vibrant, renewed light. Mira embraced them. You brought the echoes home. Addie and Loon danced around, their lanterns floating behind them like fireflies. Did you see the hollow? Loon asked, eyes wide. The Wanderer nodded. It tried to make me forget who I was. But you remembered instead, Addie grinned. That's the trick. At the center of the spiral, the Wanderer placed their lantern gently on the ground. It flickered once, then rose into the air on its own, joining the others. It would now stay lit, guiding those who came after. And then the stars joined in. Above, the sky shimmered, not with old constellations, but with new ones. Shapes no chart had ever recorded. A lantern surrounded by fireflies. A loom woven with threads of starlight. A spiral where echoes walked and found their names again. The Hollow Festival had become a story of renewal. A reminder that even the darkest spaces can be filled with memory and light. Myra touched the Wanderer's shoulder. One more chapter awaits. The Wanderer looked up at the glowing heavens. One more, they said, the light that stayed. The morning after the Hollow Festival dawned, soft and golden, as if the village itself had taken a deep breath. Dew sparkled on cobblestones like tiny lanterns. The scent of lavender bread and honey steam drifted from kitchen windows, and children chased each other through sunlit streets, their laughter echoing with a new ease. But something had changed. Something deep and quiet, like a sigh of relief held for too long, finally released. The Wanderer awoke beneath the dreaming tree, the lantern beside them still glowing faintly, now more like a heartbeat than a beacon. Mira sat nearby, braiding blue flowers into a long cord. She looked up and smiled. You did it, she said. The Hollow's hold on us is broken. The dreams are beginning to grow again. The Wanderer sat up slowly, stretching. The weight of the journey hung around their shoulders, like a well-worn cloak, heavy but warm. I didn't do it alone. No, Mira agreed. But someone had to take the first step. There was a pause as they both looked toward the village square. People moved with gentle purpose, sweeping, baking, singing, even napping in hammocks without fear. Lanterns still hung in the trees, their light soft but unwavering, even in daylight. You'll be leaving soon, won't you? Mira asked. The Wanderer nodded. There are other places like Liora, places that have forgotten their light. You'll need this, then. Mira handed over the braided flower cord. Woven into its length were tiny charms, bits of thread from the starweaver's loom, a pressed petal from the memory market, a crystal from the wellspring in the forest, and a single tiny seed. What's the seed for? For planting a dreaming tree, she said. If you ever find a place that needs one. The Wanderer smiled and tied the cord around their wrist. It shimmered slightly, warm to the touch. Then came the twins, Addie and Loon, holding a small box between them. We made you something, Addie beamed. Loon opened the lid with a flourish. Inside sat a tiny replica of their lantern crafted from driftwood, bits of mirror, and a sliver of glowing stone. It remembers what you've done, Loon whispered. It'll never forget. The Wanderer touched it gently, heart swelling. Thank you. They packed their things slowly. There was no rush, no dramatic farewell. Liora had taught them that partying didn't mean forgetting that. Stories continued even when chapters closed. At the village gates, the entire town gathered. Even the elder who once doubted, even the baker with his flour-dusted beard, even the little girl who used to hide behind her mother's skirts, they all came. Some held lanterns, some held hands, All of them held memories that now glowed instead of ached. Mira stepped forward one last time. You reminded us that dreams don't just belong to sleep. They belong to everyone brave enough to believe in them. She handed the wanderer a folded piece of paper. They opened it carefully. It was the map, the one that had first led them here. Only now, it was completely redrawn. Instead of one path, it showed many inked, in gold and blue and silver. Spirals and constellations, rivers of stars, and mountain trails made of forgotten songs. And beside each path was a single word: remember. The wanderer slipped the map into their coat, nodded to the crowd, and began walking. The forest greeted them with familiar shadows. Birds called out like old friends. A fox trailed them briefly before vanishing into mist. The air smelled of moss and curiosity. And as they moved forward, the lantern began to pulse again, faint but steady, guiding them toward the next dream in need. A whisper for the dreamers. That night, far beyond Liora, a child in a city of stone looked out their window at a sky that felt too big. They sighed and turned away, but then a flicker. A tiny light hovered just outside the glass. It pulsed softly. A lantern, impossibly small, impossibly real. The child opened the window. The lantern floated in and landed on the floor, casting gentle light across the walls. And in that glow appeared a story, a tree that dreamed, a market where memories hummed, a festival that lit up forgotten hearts, a wanderer who carried hope like a lantern through the dark. The child sat beside the light and whispered, "Tell me more." And the lantern did. Thank you for listening. If this story brought you calm, comfort, or wonder, please consider subscribing to Calm Stories for Sleep. We share bedtime tales like this every week, each one crafted to help you drift off with soft dreams and full hearts. There are always more stories waiting, more lanterns to light, more wanderers to follow. And maybe, one day, you will be part of the tale. Until then, sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, the light stays. Good night, dreamer.